I want to recognize someone that's, I think maybe it's her first visit to our program, Ms. Susan Navarre from the director of the Pittsburgh Historical Society. As I do want to shamelessly plug our new book that Bill Loxo mentioned. This is a project that we've been working on for 2 years now, and it's finally finished to the point now we actually have the book in our hands. And I want to thank Susan for allowing us to use some of their archived pictures and photos. There was a point that we were searching for, you would think we would have all kinds of photos of Whalen, but we were in search of photos of the modern times. We had old pictures and we had pictures of the excavator tearing down the roller coaster, but we didn't have a lot of pictures of the actual, we call it the heyday, when it was, you know, the 80s, 70s and 80s. But and we put out a plea to the community. We got some that way, but actually this cover photo is from the Fitchburg Public Library. I'm sorry, the Fitchburg Historical Society. So thank you, Susan. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad we can do it together.
Yep.
Before you begin, Bill, just to put a little context to that book, I think you and I were sitting in the sun at Doyle Field.
Sweating
2 years ago at the Whalen Park Remembered function that they held over there. And we were sitting there and we had our various things that we sell from the society, one of which is the Lunenburg book, part of the Image of America series. And we're looking at it, we're getting people coming up and asking about Whalen and whatever. I said to Bill, you know, we do a book on Whalen Park. How hard could that be?
Yeah. Famous last words.
So here we are 2 years later, and just to raise the bar a bit, we have two of the authors here, Bill Laxo, Bill Tyler, and just to raise the bar a bit, they thought, gee, wouldn't it be great to have Ted Alicola involved in this thing as well, which they did. The situation with Ted is he lives in Singapore. So you can imagine how much interaction they had to go through to make that work. So congratulations to everyone involved, Bill and Ted.
I echo all those, and I had to, a number of times I would come up with a question, and it would be like, you know, maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I think, oh, I got to ask Ted this question. It's 1 o'clock in the morning there, and I couldn't figure out why isn't he answering me. But it was a great project, and I thank Pat for his inspiration in doing it. Even though it was a lot of work, it was well worth it to have the final product. All right, so we'll begin. This story is going to involve the Battle of Bunker Hill, mostly, and how a colonial Pewterer, I'm going to say that right one of these times, Pewterer, from Charlestown, made Lunenburg his home for a few years. And as a side note, which is kind of coincidental, that the 250th anniversary of this epic battle took place on June 17th, 1775. It's only 4 days from now. So it's kind of fitting that we're talking about the Battle of Bunker Hill. So this program is going to revolve around this basin and how we got it and where it came from and whatnot. But the inspiration for the program came about a little bit differently than some of the programs we produce. Some time ago, we were offered the opportunity to purchase this pewter basin from a local source. And further research showed that it most probably was made in Lunenburg between 1776 and 1780 by Nathaniel, a Charlestown, Mass native who was living in Lunenburg during that time. We'll get into how we determined that later in the program. This is an image of 18th century Charlestown. Charlestown is the oldest neighborhood in Boston. It's located on a peninsula north of the Charles River, across from downtown Boston. and also adjoins the Mystic River and the Boston Harbor waterways. Charlestown was laid out in 1629 by engineer Thomas Graves, one of its earliest settlers, during the reign of Charles I of England. It was originally a separate town and the first capital of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. In colonial Charlestown and even in Lunenburg, and any communities in the 18th century, common tradesmen included blacksmiths, carpenters, cordwainers, which is a term for a shoemaker, tailors, bricklayers, shipwrights, printers, tanners, silversmiths, and pewterers. These tradesmen played a vital role in the daily lives of the colonists, providing necessary items that couldn't always be readily imported. The subject of our program, Nathaniel Austin, was born in Charlestown to parents Ebenezer Austin and Mary Smith Austin in 1741. In 18th century Charlestown, the Austin family was extensive and quite prominent. A frequently occurring name in that branch was Nathaniel. And as anybody that's done any kind of genealogy, you can understand how annoying it is when they make the same name over and over again trying to find who this person is. They always have a habit of doing that. Ebenezer's brother John also named his son Nathaniel, who was born in 1739. It was very easy to confuse these two cousins, as they were both similar tradesmen, one a silversmith and the other a pewterer. Nathaniel the Pewterer is who we are following in this story. These are images that I gathered from the internet of possibly what a pewter shop might look like. There's not a lot out there, but before the Revolution, young boys wishing to become a pewterer were bound as an apprentice for 7 or more years, learning the trade with a master pewterer. His father or guardian had to put up a sum of money for the training, and the master was required to find for the boy board, lodging, and clothes. Then he would work as a journeyman pewterer until he was able to establish himself in business. This is an image of what they call assaying old pewter, in other words, judging it or rating it on a rate of, if it's salvageable or if it's worth melting down. The initial outlay for the tools and molds was very expensive. No doubt many an American pewterer started business with a minimum of tools and only a handful of molds. Here's an image of some old pewter molds. You can see there's one up there that's sort of like that basin. They were all made of either bronze or some sort of material that was obviously could withstand the heat. An announcement of the opening of Austin's first shop appeared in the Boston Gazette, which is a copy of that up there, for October 3rd, 1763. It reads, Nathaniel Austin, pewterer, next door to Mr. Boylston's in Charlestown, makes and sells as cheap for cash or old pewter as any person in Boston. The following articles, quart and pint pots, quart and pint basins, plates and porringers of all sizes. He also carried London pewter for those who insisted on the imported article. In 1765, 3 years after the opening of his shop, he married Margaret Rand. So these are some images of finished pewter. The tankard and bobbin is similar to the one that's on the table, which I'll describe later. Pewter basically is an alloy. It's composed mainly of tin with various amounts of lead, copper, zinc, and other metals. At the time, England's mercantile policy was to export only finished pewter products to her colonies. It was also their policy to tax unworked pewter and to prohibit the export of pure tin, the main ingredient in pewter. Thus, colonial pewterers were restricted to repair work or forced to buy up worn pewter vessels at 50 to 70% of the original cost and to melt them and cast them as new items. It was commonly referred to as a poor man's silver. For if highly polished, it would resemble silver. As you can see on that basin on the left there, it's a lot shinier than the mugs but if it's polished, it can get quite a luster to it. But the process involved pouring molten metal into molds made of brass or bronze. Pewtersmiths identified their work by stamping their pieces with a mark, which was referred to as a touch. This touch is how we could identify Nathaniel Austin's work. Now we're going to shift gears here just a little bit and talk about the Battle of Bunker Hill because I think it's quite relevant to the whole story. Because without it, if that never happened, I'm sure that Nathaniel Austin would have never moved to Lunenburg. But it does involve the Battle of Bunker Hill, also known as the Battle of Breed's Hill. As I mentioned, it happened in June of 1775. The Battle of Bunker Hill took place about 2 months after the battles of Lexington and Concord, which was April 19, 1775, by which time more than 15,000 colonial troops had assembled in the vicinity of Boston to confront the British Army of 5,000 or more stationed there. Hearing that British General Thomas Gage was about to occupy Dorchester Heights, one of 2 obvious points from which Boston was vulnerable to artillery fire. The colonists decided to fortify Bunker Hill and Breed's Hill, which constituted the other exposed areas. The colonists completed a redoubt atop Breed's Hill before being met with about 2,300 incoming British troops sent by Gage. At first, the British were repelled and stopped by heavy fire from the colonial troops. But on the second or third attack, the attackers carried the redoubt and forced the surviving defenders to flee. Casualties numbered more than 1,000 British and about 450 American colonists. And just because I had to find out what a redoubt was, because I didn't know what it was, thank goodness for Google, again, a redoubt is a fortified military structure that protects a key position from attack. Redoubts are typically built from earth or logs, but can also be made of stone or brick. They can be permanent or temporary and are often built around existing fortifications. I'm glad I can live now and I didn't know what a redoubt is. Did anybody know what a redoubt was? I'm sure some. I know, Lou, I know. Of course you do. You do. I'm ashamed. Oh, good. I'm not the only one. Because the British were under sniper fire from the colonists, General William Howe, commanding officer of the British forces, instructed Vice Admiral Samuel Graves of the British Royal Navy to have his ships turn their guns on the town and hold fire. Cannonballs and incendiary carcasses from the ships and an artillery battery on Cops Hill set buildings of Charlestown on fire. The burning of Charlestown is often overlooked in the history of the battle of Bunker Hill, but it was a move by the British that probably affected more in the town than the actual battle. Residents of the little hamlet of Charlestown fled with anything they could grab. This is just a sort of a, it kind of shows you the whole layout of the way the battle was. You see the ship on the bottom down there.
Excuse me, Bill. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the last slide?
Sure.
Thank you.
This one?
Yes. Yep.
You all set?
Yep.
Okay. These are some other images that I found on the internet. Some of them are quite, I believe this is a painting of some sorts, but it kind of gives you the whole, kind of a bird's eye view of what it must have looked like with the ships and on fire and everything. It must have been quite to be involved in. Unfortunately, this is not a rendering of 18th century Lunenburg. I wish it was. But I mean, it's not, someone could have the argument that it looks like the church, the Congregational church, but it isn't anyway. But I think it somewhat represents what it might have looked like in 1775. The question that I wanted to find an answer to was why in the world did Nathaniel Austin choose to come to Lunenburg? And it still is an aching desire for me to find out what that is, but I'm probably not going to. Between Charlestown and here, there are many towns he could have settled in. My first thought was that he had some relatives here. There was a family of Austins living in Lunenburg at the time, but tedious research proved that they were not related. So, you may wonder how we know that Nathaniel Austin did indeed move to Lunenburg. We are certain that his fourth child, William, was born here in 1778, according to church records in our collection of baptisms between 1733 and 1808. There were also tax records that attest to Nathaniel living here during that time. And if you look right here, is March 18th, baptized William, the son of Nathaniel Austin, lately from, I couldn't get the whole thing on there and have it readable, but it's from Charlestown. So that we knew he was in Lunenburg at that time, in 1778. Further, another one from our collections is the tax record. The property tax records are a very important research tool in determining when anyone was living in Lunenburg. We're fortunate to have these tax records in our collection. And this one is dated 1778, and these are the selectmen at the time. And named Nathaniel Austin. Again, I had to, this document was much bigger than that, but I had to, make it so it was readable. But it goes on further, and it lists Nathaniel Austin, and it just lists there what they have that would be taxed. It doesn't give you any information as to where they lived. But again, it's proof that he was here. So the next question is, where in Lunenburg did he settle with his wife, Margaret, and their three children? Margaret, Nathaniel Jr., and Isaac. As I mentioned, tax records don't define where anyone lived, only what they were taxed on. For this, we relied on George A. Cunningham's History of Lunenburg from 1719 to 1866, which also included extensive genealogies of early Lunenburg families from 1865. These volumes, along with Cyrus Pilgrim's 1833 map of Lunenburg, which is right there, this is the one, showed every standing house at that time with a corresponding number. So this map blown up, that is where Nathaniel Austin, why does this keep doing this? That is where Nathaniel Austin lived. It was the K223. And the K number refers to every house had they assigned it a K, we call it a K number, but it was every house had a number, and this particular house was K223, which is located at 114 Leominster Road, which is basically at the intersection of, this is Leominster Road, and that's West Street. That's right in the corner house there. This house was built sometime before 1768. According to deeds, Austin never owned the house, so we presume he was a tenant. As an interesting side note, William Austin who we'll talk about later, and Nathaniel's son, had a daughter named Elizabeth, born in 1808 in Charlestown. She went on to marry Reverend James Thurston in 1844, who was a minister in Lunenburg between 1855 and 1859. And later on, during that time, they lived at 114 Leominster Road, the same house their father was born in. So that was quite a coincidence. Now we're going to get into what I talked about earlier was touches. As I mentioned before, pewterists marked their pieces as an artist would sign a painting. As these touches changed, it created a timeline, so to speak, that would roughly date them. Nathaniel was active in the pewter trade from 1763 to 1807. Austin's original touch mark, which is on the screen at the moment, was that of a rampant lion in a gateway, which gave respect to the fact that we were a British colony. However, when the British attacked Charlestown and his home and shop were burned down, it appears he had a change of allegiance. As his next touch mark, adopted a heraldic eagle as a touch mark, as can be seen on the basin on the screen, as on the basin on the table there, which you can be free to look at later. Sometime after 1780, Austin and his family moved back to Charlestown, rebuilt his home and shop, and resumed his pewter business. Nathaniel and Margaret had 5 children, all born in Charlestown, except for William, who, as we mentioned earlier, was born in Lunenburg. 2 of the children gained some notoriety during their lives. One of the children was Nathaniel, the General Nathaniel Austin Jr., 1772 to 1861. He was a businessman, politician, and investor in Charlestown, Massachusetts. He built the Austin block in 1827, which is pictured on the screen. This is one of the oldest commercial buildings in Charlestown. Austin was a brigadier general in the 3rd Division of the Massachusetts Militia between 1815 and 1820. In 1812, as a Federalist, he beat his brother William, a Jeffersonian Democrat, by 1 vote for some state representative seat. You remember that the brothers were tough but gentlemanly campaigners. And the competition caused no lingering ill will. The general died in Charlestown in 1861 at the age of 89. A lot of times at the historical site, I refer to going out the rabbit hole, which we do all the time. This is one of the things when I was down deep in the rabbit hole, I'd see all these things in the hospital. I searched for a picture of General Austin, but I couldn't find them. So that was the best I could do. This, however, is a picture of William Austin. I need help, Dave. That is a picture of William Austin, with General Austin Jr. brother. He turned to law practice after graduating from Harvard College. William gained some notoriety for participating in a duel, another rabbit hole trip, fought over political issues with James Elliott in 1806, in which he was wounded but not severely. In today's society, I'm not sure that practice would work very well, but apparently back then it was quite duels were with a regular procedure you had to go through, quite regimented. I have no idea why this is doing that. He was also known as a literary figure too, as the author of Peter Rugg, The Missing Man, a story set in 1770 when Peter Rugg sets off in a carriage to Boston during a severe thunderstorm and disappears, never to be seen again. These stories were published between 1824 and 1827. Peter Rugg became accepted as a figure in a popular New England ghost tales. Like Nathaniel, William served as a state senator. He was also very active in real estate. William Austin died in 1841 at the age of 63. Nathaniel, Margaret, General Austin, and William are all buried in the 5th Street burial ground in Charlestown. In conclusion, we may never discover why Nathaniel came to Lunenburg after Charlestown was burned. Even though the facts don't back it up, I still feel that he at least must have known someone in the other Austin family that lived here at the same time. It just makes sense. This concludes the program, and I want to thank you for joining us today. You're free to go up there and look at the basin on the left, and the other items is a ecclesiastical pewter from the Methodist Church that was built here in 1830, which was used for communion. So thank you again for coming.